Hello, welcome to today's immigration tidbit. So you're in removal or deportation proceedings and you're wondering, or your attorney's wondering, how much information you have to give. Well, first you have to understand about the burden of proof. First of all, what does that mean? And then what is the burden of proof in removal proceedings? So burden of proof is when a particular side has to prove something to a certain degree in order for it to be actionable, in order for the court to respond and proceed on it. So, for example, let's just say, we're talking burglary, or theft. So theft is intent to steal something. So, of course, the burden of proof is you have to have the intent. You have to intend to actually take something. Now, the burden of proof is what level of proof one has to show in order to do that. In a criminal court, it's by clear and convincing evidence. So let's just say they want to go and steal a shirt. In criminal court, they would have to convince a jury by clear and convincing evidence that the person intended to steal that shirt. Okay? Not by for example, in civil court, a preponderance of evidence. You can consider a preponderance of evidence like 51% versus 49%. Okay? Sort of a little more than half is preponderance. Clear and convincing is higher. There's no exact number, but it has to be clear and convincing. So you take whatever you want from that. So in removal proceedings, the question of burden of proof initially is clear and convincing evidence. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that the respondent, the person who is in removal proceedings, there needs to be clear and convincing evidence that that person is removable. Now, who has the burden? And that's another issue with burden of proof. Who has the initial burden of showing what needs to be shown under the burden of proof? Well, it's the government. So if you're put in removal proceedings in the beginning, you do not have the burden of proof to show you are not removable. No. It is the government's burden to show that you are removable from the United States, and that must be shown by clear and convincing evidence. So, for example, if you have a green card and the government claims you committed some crime, possession for sale of marijuana or possession for sale of cocaine, whatever, and you're a drug trafficker, and they come in and they say you're removable because you're a drug trafficker, making you an aggravated felon, and therefore you need to be removed from the United States. But let's say that they have no evidence. Let's say they don't have any conviction documents, they don't have any abstract of judgment, they don't have any documents from the court, they have only their particular... I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. They have only their statement that you committed the crime. Okay, and they present their internal document. Let's say they did a criminal record search and they have their internal document with hundreds of numbers on there that you have no idea what they mean, and nobody looking at that would know what that means. If that went in front of the immigration judge, many of them would likely look at that and not have any idea that the person's really convicted, and would turn to the person they're trying to remove and say, did you commit this crime? Well, if I was representing that person, I would jump right away and say, Your Honor, the burden of proof is not on respondent to prove he or she committed the crime. It's on the government to prove by clear and convincing evidence the crime was committed, and then, the burden shifts to the respondent or the person who's trying to be removed. So that's what would happen a lot of times. So the reality is, if the government comes in there and says that person's removable and has a scant evidence or has their own internal documents that their internal programs created, these sheets of printing saying, oh, well, this person was obviously convicted. Look at our sheet with 600 numbers that nobody but us has any idea what it means. Then the attorney for the respondent should make a motion to terminate the proceedings because they didn't show by clear and convincing evidence that the person was removable. Of course, that doesn't mean that they can't repaper, as they say, the proceedings and have the proper evidence. But at least that moment in time, they did not prove by clear and convincing evidence. They didn't meet their burden of proof, and the case should be terminated. Okay.